I've not actually talked about this ever. I've talked to like a handful of people in my life. I've drawn attention to this thing a couple of times. I mean, really, very few. So it's quite a joy to actually share this with you. Yeah. So, and we have to thank Thich Nhat Hanh for sticking this in the back of his books, or one of his books. Otherwise, I would never find this. It's like an academic text in Buddhism. Academic as in practical. Academic as in subjectively practical. So, the 7 factors of enlightenment. I'm just going to say what they are, and then we're going to go through them. The enlightenment factor of mindfulness is present. Mindfulness. That is what we were all very keen on in the West, just plucked out mindfulness. The second one is investigation of mental objects. Investigation of mental objects. These are enlightenment factors. Mindfulness, which is kind of what we've done up to this point. Investigation of mindfulness is kind of what we're doing here in the mental objects. So what's next? It's almost like, we've done this, yeah, okay, now we're into this one. And then the next one is the enlightenment factor of energy. Right. Now remember, you did this ardently. So there's energy to all of this. There is energy. Energy. Okay, we'll have a look at that in a moment. And then the enlightenment factor of, let's not give it away. Let's not give it away. Okay, so how does it work? The enlightenment factor of mindfulness is in me, or when the enlightenment factor of mindfulness is absent. Got it? It's gone. Got it? Gone. And he knows how the arising of the non-arisen. The arising of the non-arisen. Enlightenment factor of mindfulness comes to be, we've taken this a step further. We've done all this. We know about all of this. Okay? So this time, and I don't know if it misses it out, because it might, either the translation missed it out, or they've missed it out in the actual text, and the experts have got it wrong, and they've forgotten it throughout history, or they just said, you know about this, so we're just going to miss that out right now. So what he says is that, so when the enlightenment factor of mindfulness is absent, he knows the enlightenment factor of mindfulness is not in me. And they jump straight to that last bit. Okay, remember the last bit, which is we're being sensitive to the before it arises, we're sensitive to when it disappears when it's absent, and then we're aware that it will not arise in the future. So it says, and he knows how the arising of the non-arisen enlightenment factor of the mindfulness comes to be. He knows how the arising of the non-arisen enlightenment factor of mindfulness comes to be. Okay, so this one we're looking at how the arising of the non, we're basically going, let's create this. The enlightenment factor of mindfulness is in me. When the enlightenment factor of mindfulness is absent, he knows the enlightenment factor of mindfulness is not in me. And he knows how the arising of the non-arisen enlightenment factor of mindfulness comes to be. We're actually interested in that process right there. So we're not interested in abandoning these things. Now we're saying, we're really now going into this bit now here. Because we're no longer getting bothered by feelings and sensations and other things pop into our heads. We managed to calm all that down. It's now, okay, mindfulness, yeah, be mindful. I've understood that. I'm not. Okay, I am. I'm not. I am. I'm not. Okay. And then you go, right, got rid of all that. Okay. But how detailed did we get to that? The arising of mindfulness. And why do we do this? Because he knows how the arising of the non-arisen enlightenment factor of mindfulness comes to be, and how perfection in the development of the arisen enlightenment factor of mindfulness comes to be. we're approaching zero. Nothing, something. Nothing, mindfulness. We're really going, it's like a seed. It's like we've had the whole tree, and then, oh, look, there's a plant. Okay, let's say above this bit, it's like the plant pops up over the earth, through the earth, and we can see it. And then we're saying, okay, where does this seed, where does this thing come from? You dig under the soil a bit, this is pre-conscious, before it arises, and you can see a bit of the stalk. So you dig around in other places, and you go, oh yeah, there's little things underneath here. And now you're saying, we're kind of like reducing that so that there's not even a bit of a stalk, there's nothing. And now we're going into, well, how did this start in the first place? And now we're approaching the seed. Okay, the seed from which all of this comes from. The entire tree, okay, the thing under the earth, and then it's like, well, it started somewhere. What's the seed? And what we're saying is that, what they're saying is that's the perfection. Perfection in development. Because you can't ever achieve it. So it's like it's like a logarithm from 0 to something. That's 0 to, let's call that 1. So now it's 0 to 0.1, 0.01, 0.0001, and so on and so forth. Okay, and it's like, this is pre-conscious. This is like the opposite of the dissolution, of the origination and it wasn't dissolution, origination and disappearance of it. What was the term that they used? Yeah, origination and dissolution. Okay. Notice how the non-arising in the future. Abandoning. Okay, that's the abandoning. Abandoning. Okay. And the other one was the arising. Okay, so that's arising, that's abandoning. So here we're really interested in the arising of it. Okay, and we're looking at it in more and more detail. And we're talking about pre-conscious state. Okay, so as we're going through time. So, we do that for mindfulness. You do it for the investigation of mental object, which is what we're doing. You do it for energy. So even within here, we're kind of going into this, so that it's no longer about mindfulness and whether we become aware of something. We're no longer interested in investigation of mental objects, because these are kind of like fairly substantial. We're into the state of, there's just some kind of energy. Okay, there's no stalk to this thing. There's nothing coming out of this this seed. Okay, so we're kind of looking at the seed now and going, right, well, there's some energy in there, all right? There's some energy, there's some kind of vector of intent, there's something that is initiating all of this, and that's the energy. And you do exactly the same with that. That the enlightenment factor of energy is in me, or when the enlightenment factor of energy is absent, he knows the enlightenment factor of energy is not in me. That might be like here, energy. Okay, and he knows the light, and he knows how the rising of the non-arisen enlightenment factor of energy comes to be. And notice it's the enlightenment factor. We are talking about minuscule vectors. Okay, it's a factor. It's a tiny little thing that, again, it's present in everything. It's just that we're looking at this as a higher order or a basic element to how any of this works. The non-arisen enlightenment factor comes to be how perfection in the development of the arisen enlightenment factor comes to be. When the enlightenment factor of joy, don't we like that? Joy. 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 Now I think they're called jhanas, maybe, remember, you've got different traditions and different people and different Buddhists, and they're all trying to describe these kinds of things that are meant to be common to us. And this is just one form of it. But it's quite a nice form. But the jhanas, you can imagine getting into this state and going, ooh, wow, okay. And then going mental objects and really getting to the core of that, and then energy. And then going into energy and going, holy. And that releases some kind of joy. You're like, joy, that's what it is. The fact that I have this, my intentionality, it's almost like my energy, my intention, my spiritual energy, my spiritual energy exists. It exists. And that is joyful. There's something joyful about that. I don't know if that results from energy or it's something deeper. I don't know. I don't know if it is going into the like closer to zero, or if this is a consequence of once you've understood the energy thing, or it's a different aspect of being. So this, I don't know. I've just made this up. I don't know. Okay, but it could be a different aspect of one's existence. Mindfulness, okay. Investigation of mental objects, okay. Energy, oh, that's kind of biological. That's more like my entire body, maybe. Joy. In fact, I remember vaguely coming up with this, but joy. It's not joy like I'm happy kind of joy. It's like really joy. It's something more refined, I think. But you can imagine people getting blissed out with that. Okay, and they do talk about this, Buddhists. And the reason why they can spend so long in these states is because they're getting into like crazy amounts of like bliss states. And the scientists have talked about we've got more psychotropic drugs in our heads than any amount of morphine could kind of influence us. It's just, so they're kind of releasing that. By doing all this, they're kind of getting dopamine hits, and people are getting these kind of blissed out states that are stronger than cocaine, okay, and heroin. So the next one after this, after joy, it's tranquility. Wow, tranquility. Tranquility. So, yeah. So the fact you've got any energy is great. Joy, wow, it's amazing. Tranquil, sweet, tranquil. And then it's got the enlightenment factor of concentration. 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 Equanimity means it's balanced. You're not going forward, against. You're really just like balanced. And concentration. It's like there's nothing, nothing that can interfere with this. And then the final one, equanimity. Equanimity. Now maybe this is sequential. It's definitely presented sequentially. It might not be, because it does say the 7 factors. So maybe these are different gateways there. Maybe. Equanimity. Equanimity. Equalness. Equanimity. Quite a long way to get to, fraternity. Equanimity. Perfect balance, though. Not concept, not emotional, not a passionate thing. Almost like a pure state of equanimity, which is involatile, indubitable. Right. And then it talks about the 4 truths. And what are the 4 truths? So once you've got into that state, you're like, well, since you're actually there, you might as well go for this. The 4 truths. The 4 noble truths. And the 4 noble truths are known as, well, I thought they were slightly different from this, but 4 noble truths, it says, this is suffering. Normally, the 4 truths are understood as birth, death, sickness, and birth, death, sickness, birth, death, sickness, and old age, aging. Okay, growing old. And those are kind of like meant to be the common interpretations of it. And then there are these other interpretations of it, which is meeting things that you don't like, be deprived of things that you do like, and so on and so forth. Okay, more abstract terms, but this is kind of like the common person, lay person's understanding. And then there's this other type, which I can't remember. And then there's this, which is kind of related, I think. It's more to the abstraction. So this is suffering. When it says that this is suffering, all our attachments and everything else, this is suffering. To get out of all that is suffering. According to reality, according to something I can experience. He knows this is the origin of suffering. Origin of suffering. So this is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. All this stuff about arising, abandoning, all that kind of stuff. According to reality, he knows this is the cessation of suffering. So it's like a summary. So this is how we get to the end of all this, you know, origination, dissolutions, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. This is the way to do it. And according to reality, he knows this is the road leading to the cessation. So this is the road to cessation. Okay? It's like a summary. And know it. Can you affirm these? If you've been through all this, and it could be, it's a bit like a formula, and if you follow this and you follow this, and da 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 da, therefore this. Is that true? Yes. Now, if you construct yourself, clean yourself, and then almost like reboot yourself with this, that's the result. It's like if you go into therapy, if you conduct various kinds of therapy, it will improve your mental state. It will potentially get rid of the things that you learned when you were a child, when you were young, that are particularly pleasant, and eradicates those. But this is all self-manipulated. Okay, so you're doing this just within your own mind, meditation. Okay, that's all very interesting. Okay, I think. Very powerful, potentially. But you can see why it's taken many hundreds of years, thousands of years. People are still forming it. And the level of understanding and awareness of all this is still a bit tricky. And this is quite a conceptual understanding of it, all these words. But the idea is to practice this. People who practice this and demonstrate this. Some people are more talented at this than others. Okay? So it's not the academic knowledge, it's not knowing this, it's not these words, it's not knowing the formula. It's actually being this. It's actually having these qualities and characteristics, especially these. But then again, some people might be fooled into thinking, well, if you're nice and gentle, which some people are, then they're enlightened. It's like, well, maybe, maybe not. Maybe they're just lucky and they were born quite lucky and they had quite nice experiences, or if they had challenging ones, they managed to transform those, and so they're actually really gentle as a result. And does that disqualify them from being a Buddhist? I mean, this is a path, it's a journey, and it's defined, and you can go down this journey. So it's helpful if you want to go down such journeys. Right, there's two extra little bits that were put at the end there, and I just want to read one of them because it's called Highest Knowledge, because it gives you just a flavour of how powerful this potentially could be. Right, verily monks, whosoever practices these four foundations of mindfulness, body, feelings, consciousness, mental object, you practice these four foundations of mindfulness in this manner for 7 years, then one of these two fruits may be expected by him. Highest knowledge, here and now, basically, yukaya. Or, if some remainder of clinging is yet present, the state of non-returning. We haven't returned down to this state. So you're kind of in this state. Thoughts occurring, feelings occurring, and you acting on them without being aware of it. For the only things that arise may be these things. These are the only things that kind of arise, okay, that you're willing to act on. And these other ones might not ever arise. Hatred might never arise. You gardened it so that it never occurs. Somebody's pulling off your thumbnails and fingernails, and you're like, okay, right, cool, wow, I'm not sure why you're doing that. It's kind of, you're a confused human being, but I don't bear you any ill will. Phenomenal, okay? Phenomenal. But the chances are you won't be able to do that. If somebody pulls off my fingernail, I'll be like, I'd be, the pain, the suffering, I'm still stuck in this, okay? I'm still stuck in the aggregates of clinging, okay? I'm attaching myself to that sensation, okay? And then the cause of it, and so on and so forth. I'll probably redirect that pain and that suffering towards the person that's doing this to me, and so on and so forth. So verily monks, highest knowledge here and now, or if some remainder of clinging, yes, it is present in a state of non-returning, not getting back to that. I think I've always been confused about what that means. I think that's a pretty good interpretation. I think you've heard that in my earlier expression of it. O monks, let alone 7 years. Oh, should any person practicing these 4 foundations of mindfulness in this manner for 6 years, 5 years, 4 years, for 3 years, 2, 1 year, then one of these 2 fruits may be expected by him, highest knowledge here and now, or, if some remainder of clinging is yet present, the state of non-returning. Ooh, maybe you could do it in a year. Cool. O monks, let alone a year. Should any person practicing these 4 foundations of mindfulness in this manner for 7 months, for 6, for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 month, half a month, then one of these 2 fruits may be expected by him. Again, it's this kind of litany or repetition. Highest knowledge here and now, or of some remainder of clinging is yet present, the state of non-returning. O monks, let alone half a month. Should any person practicing these 4 foundations of mindfulness in this manner for a week, then one of these 2 fruits may be expected by him. Highest knowledge here and now, or if some remainder of clinging is yet present, the state of non-returning. Well, you can imagine if you practice it for 7 years, at some point you're in the last year, or you're in the last 6 months, or you're in the last month, or you're in the last 2 weeks. Do you see? And you don't know when you're actually, how close you are to the end point. Kind of a bit like this. You don't really know. You might have a talent to it. You might have the right qualities that this, or your strength of will, or various conditions of who you are means that you can navigate this and get to this kind of experience pretty quickly, let's say. This is the only way, monks, for the perfection of being, for the overcoming of sorrow and lamentation, the destruction of suffering and grief, for reaching the right path, for the attainment of nirvana, namely the 4 foundations of mindfulness. That's amazing. Okay, there's another one, which again is back to the Thich Nhat Hanh's book, I think. Here follows a discourse on the foundation of mindfulness. Talk about breathing in and out. Okay, breathing in and out, experiencing mind, out, so on and so forth. Right, just to give you a tiny little bit more. So the timing issue, it's all about time. Everything that I've done is to do with time. So I've definitely not gone into this kind of level of experiential sense. However, I can appreciate it. It's like classical music going, wow. And that means that if I meet somebody that has any kind of these qualities, I'm like, wow, fresh. Okay, and I hope that I'd be susceptible or receptive to them. How do the 4 foundations cultivated and regularly practiced bring the 7 factors of enlightenment to perfection? So here we go. Whenever a monk dwells in the contemplation of body, feelings, mind, and mind objects, unclouded mindfulness becomes established in him. And when unclouded mindfulness is established in him, at that time, the enlightenment factor, mindfulness, is initiated in the monk. So once you're detached, basically, all of these, that is initiated. Remember, the body exists, and that enables the state of detachment. You're establishing it with that statement, or that mental acknowledgement, that awareness state. Okay, for body, feelings, consciousness. So you're within consciousness, remember, and mental objects. And once you've gone through a few of these, and you've kind of just said, the body exists, feelings exist, consciousness, the mental object exists, right? Bing! Establishes mindfulness. Is initiated in the monk. Bing. At that time, at that moment, where these things have gone, the monk develops the enlightenment factor, mindfulness. At that time, it's exactly the same moment, he gains perfection in the development of the enlightenment factor, mindfulness. So basically, instead of thinking that you have to kind of go back, like this, arising, before the arising of the states that we're feeling, it's basically once you've detached, and that detachment means that you are at zero, and that tiny little boop, little burp of a thing is mindfulness. Okay, so let's read the next one. And we're talking about just be sensitive to the language here, and we're saying it's not about going back in time or trying to get sensitive before the thing arises. It's literally looking at the moment. We've talked about the moment, the Buddhists talk about the moment, the power of now, so on and so forth. So, dwelling mindfully in that manner, i.e., being mindful. He wisely investigates, examines and scrutinizes the respective object. And while doing so, the enlightenment factor, the investigation of reality, is initiated in the monk. All right. Because you're deciding to look at this, that's it. And so, whenever you're doing any of these, you are being mindful. Whenever you're doing any of these, you are investigating mental objects. Do you see? It's quite cool. So while doing so, the enlightenment factor, so when you're doing it again, you're going back to this, you're actually, every time you start doing it, you're initiating that. And every time you're going into these, finding mental objects, you're investigating mental objects. And every time it's saying, while doing so, the enlightenment factor of investigation of reality is initiated in the monk. And if you're sensitive, at that time, the monk develops the enlightenment factor of investigation of reality. That is the intention. And at that time, he gains perfection. So it's not beyond that. It's not something afterwards that you have to do. It's that while you're practicing this stuff, it's actually present. That mindfulness and investigation is present while you're looking at it. While you've been listening to this. And it still is at all times. So, but while you were listening, you're like, what are the five aggregates? That I'm interested. That is present. Okay, it's not something that didn't exist. It's always been there. Okay, and at that time, he gains perfection in the development of the enlightenment factor of investigation of reality. So while it's quite nice that he's got this, and it's definitely more sequential. This is by another author at some point. While he wisely investigates, examines, scrutinizes the object, unlimited energy is initiated in him. So while you're doing all this kind of stuff, energy is initiated, spiritual energy, I guess. And then when enlightenment factor energy is initiated, at that time the monk develops the enlightenment factor of energy. And at that time the gains perfection in the development. Wow. In him, possessed of energy, a worldly rapture arises. And when a monk possessed of energy, a worldly rapture arises at that time. Because of this arises at that time. It's like an emergent level, or it's a deeper base, and so on. And then it goes into, in him possessed of energy, a body and mind of one who filled with rapture becomes tranquil. And when the body and mind of one who is filled with rapture becomes tranquil, at that time, the enlightenment factor of tranquility is initiated in him. So that's kind of like the lotus. We're going, every moment when you're doing any of these things are happening. The trick is somehow we're getting to that, appreciating it as it happens. That means your refinement of mind is down to that. Okay. And so, tranquility, and then on the mind thus concentrated, tranquil, because it's tranquil, then you get concentrated. On the mind thus concentrated, he looks with perfect equanimity. Once you're in this state, he looks with perfect equanimity. And when looking on his concentrated mind with perfect equanimity, not to or for, not worried, not against, just like, wow, it's amazing. At that time, the enlightenment factor equanimity is initiated. Four foundations of mindfulness in that way cultivated and regularly practiced bring the seven factors of enlightenment to perfection. Finally, how do the seven factors of enlightenment cultivated and regularly practiced bring the perfection of wisdom and deliverance to perfection? Herein, a monk develops the enlightenment factors: mindfulness, investigation of reality, energy, rapture, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity, based on detachment, based on dispassion, based on detachment, based on dispassion, based on cessation, resulting in relinquishment. Wow. 7 factors of enlightenment, and that we cultivated and regularly practiced, bring wisdom and deliverance to perfection. Wow. Wow. Wow is all I'm going to say. Wow, wow, wow. Okay, so I think we're going to contain this within the Buddhist love lessons, or less or equal to 3 lessons. Phenomenal, phenomenal stuff, phenomenal stuff. Absolutely phenomenal stuff. Phenomenal stuff, phenomenal stuff. Okay, I'm just going to finish this off with, because I've done this. When I've understood XQ, if you look, it's to do with our perception of mathematics. Mathematics, look at objects, or geometry, and so on and so forth, projecting, or mathematics as symbolic manipulation, or mathematics as a mind conducting maths. This is the mind conducting maths. It looks like a graph and applying it to something else. It's more like a mathematical representation of one's experience. And what we're doing is we're attempting to, my interpretation, is that we're attempting to reach, I can't remember what was the expression I used to have, a subjective time tends to 0. We're attempting to develop our sensitivity to pre-conscious. So every time we're talking now, it's like a word, and then another word, and another word, and then there's logic to that. Or because I like this flowing notion, there's a flowingness of all these words, and then meaning flows. And we become sensitive to the fact that the mind that is present, listening to the flowing. And so we enter into a metacognitive state, rather than an analysis of this word and that word, like they are things, like they are objects, okay, which is the study of objects, science. And so this is not meant to be a representation of a physical reality. It is, this I think applies to some extent, our subjective experience. Okay, so we're looking at when our time, subjective experience tends to 0. Okay, so at any moment, we're moving through time, we've got kind of extended blocks, we think that we're the words, we think of our personality, we think of our identity, we think these are us, and if you kind of go, wait a minute, that's not me, my body, feelings, that's not, right, shh, that's not, okay, shh, and then we're just moving through time as a conscious being. And we're doing that simultaneously. That's why there's this kind of religious aspect to it, because it's happening simultaneously with all us human beings. What they're saying, I think a Buddhist, is that it's for all humanity throughout all of time. But I'm quite content to say we're moving along through time, and the fact that all of us right now are experiencing this, and there's a co-present existence as we're going through time, consciously, we're sharing this reflective state. Phenomenal stuff, right? Phenomenal stuff. So, right, well, thank you very much for listening, and I think I'm going to talk about this bit, okay? So if that was just about the Buddhist stuff, that was the Buddhist stuff. I'm now going to go back to the 0 social distancing, if I've got the energy and time to do so. All right. But thank you very much for listening.